What's up, Resource Nation? I'm really excited because I have my good friend René Rodriguez with us here today, all the way from Minnesota. And last week, guys, you saw a different side of me that I haven't shown in 10 years, and René is really the reason. And I wanted to share the backstory with how we got to the story that we shared last week, because I went through an amazing event that René put on. I gave him what I feel like still to this day is the nicest compliment I can give anybody, which is I feel like he changed my life. And to get him on with me means the world to me, because that's the least I can do is talk about the experience that changed my life with the guy that did that. So René, thanks for being with us today, man. I so appreciate it.
It's an honor, my friend. It's an absolute honor. I love what you're doing, and I miss talking to you, so this is fun.
I know. So last week, guys, again, you saw a different side of me. And honestly, that was really tough. René and I talked about the video and releasing it, and it got, worked over and changed a little bit. And it was because that's not my natural tendency at all. René knows this now, a little bit more about me. And for me, like, I'm a guy that sees challenges, and I'm going to run towards those challenges like they're walls, and I'm going to smash through them. And as soon as I'm done with that, I'm going to look for the next wall, and I'm going to run through that as a challenge. And I'm not a guy that typically reflects or looks back. And so René in Amplifii in Seattle was teaching me, and this is really what I'm learning and why I wanted to share this, is let your heart speak from sequence. Did I get that right, René? It's been a while since I've been in Amplifii, but is that right?
Close enough, yeah. Heart and sequence, yeah.
Yeah, and that was tough for me because I'm not a guy that reflects. And so I kind of want to talk about the backstory, and you can kind of share your perspective, because mine in Amplifii felt so messy. Like, you were pulling stuff out of me that people don't. I obviously shed a lot of tears, and I'm not a guy that I didn't even think I had tear ducts until I met René. But it was so messy, and I don't know, is that typical in Amplifii experience, like to have that be messy, or was it that just me?
Well, I wouldn't say it's typical in Amplifii, but I would say that anytime we're exploring a story that we maybe have pushed away, I mean, it can be a little bit sloppy, but think about it though. It's the reason it's pushed away is it's a coping mechanism, and it's also why you're a survivor. You're able to compartmentalize parts of your life, and you're able to push through, and we create short memory spans, if you will, around negative events, because we want to just push through them.
Yeah.
And then you come to an event to ask you to re-explore and open that old wound. And everything about you is pushing against it, because you're thinking it's the reason I'm okay because I don't explore that wound. I'm okay because I didn't go back and revisit that. And here I'm asking you to actually tap into it, not as a source of weakness, but as a source of the best and most authentic power you have to be able to connect. And so when you reconnect to it, it can come out pretty emotional. But it's not the goal, but you know what? It's okay. Crying there's a purpose for it. There's a real need for a human being to be able to experience tears, and without it, where's our empathy? Where's our ability to connect? Where's the reality for us to be able to process an emotion and to feel? It's a very healthy thing. It's just not always fun to do.
So let's frame this. You also teach frame, message, and Tiedown. But for somebody that hasn't seen Amplifii, doesn't really know what it is, I try to explain it, man, and I don't do a very good job. I just end up rambling and sharing my experience. So for somebody that hasn't really experienced, doesn't know what Amplifii is, like, what's the shortest way that you explain it?
Yeah, so we understand the world through sequencing. It's just how it is. Sequence matters. The way something's presented to us really, really matters. We all know it, because we know that if we're giving bad news, we're not just going to start with the bad news. We're going to start with some good news, right? They call it the sandwich, right? Good news, good news, or feedback. If it's bad feedback, you're going to start with what you really liked. We know that the brain softens when it hears that. So that's an expression of sequence. We also know that there's an important sequence when we're communicating with somebody, and if we don't follow it, our brain will fill in the missing pieces. And so if I share a story with you, or if I tell you what it is I do for a living, and whatever comes out of my mouth triggers an emotional response in the audience, that emotional response that's triggered is part of the frame of reference they had over what you just said. And so the real simple example is if I say, hey, I'm a used car salesman, you can trust me. most people would say trust is not what I associate to used car salesman,
Right.
and it's not congruent. And so if I just say I'm a used car salesman without saying anything, that negative frame comes in and creates a filter between our conversation. And so the same is true being a real estate agent, being a loan officer. In a lot of senses, saying I'm a coach. Some people go, oh my God, another coach. Oh, are we doing a self-help? It's like, oh God, here we go, kumbaya. Everything carries a frame, and a lot of times if we're not aware of what frame our language is triggering, we could have our message completely misconstrued. And so the framing, or the sequence of frame message tie down is about setting the frame and managing the frame, then delivering the message, and then tying it down would be, this is what it means to you. And so following that sequence is what we teach at Amplify, and exactly what I just did now. I started with the frame. I delivered the message, which was what you asked, but I didn't say framing is this is
Right.
that. I started by creating the frame, then I answered your question, and then the tie down would be anytime we're delivering a message that needs to be influential or that needs to be persuasive, if we don't understand how that works, we risk losing the essence of what we're trying to say.
Yeah, and then, man, magic happens because, again, for 10 years, we've shot a show a certain way with a different style and really just tried to provide value. And that's why I love you. Yesterday, I was talking to you about this call, and I love your heart. You're like, dude, let's just provide value, which is kind of like right up our alley. Like, we've never tried to monetize the show. It's like, let's just provide the most relevant content we can, and that's exactly what you said. So I so appreciate that. The value that I got was obviously everything I learned, and then the video came from that, and I learned something new at age 42, like, oh, people connect with this frame message tie down. Oh, wow, a lot of people connect with this. I'm the guy that's always trying to, like, here's the news story, here's how you do Facebook, Instagram, blah, 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 and then switched over to this crazy, vulnerable, crying Ryan. And I'm telling you, man, there were people that connected with this last week's show that I didn't even know had watched the show. And, some high-level people. I was telling you yesterday, like, I'm on a call with John Maxwell, one of the, best authors in America, and Casey Crawford, arguably one of the best CEOs in America, and they're talking about our Amplify video. And I'm telling you, that's the importance for entrepreneurs, realtors, and lenders watching this and understanding what Rene is teaching is the frame message tie down. And I wish I would have known that. I wish I would have done Amplify 10 years ago. It would have changed me sooner. But that's the value that I really get from it. I don't know. I'm sure you can wrap that up in a nicer bow than I just did. But for entrepreneurs watching, that's huge value.
You've been doing it for years. And that's the thing, is the best communicators. And you're in a leadership position because you do it. You just did it unconsciously or intuitively. And we know that the best teachers, you talked about Casey and John Maxwell, two incredible leaders that already understand that there's a sequence of how they tell something. Listen to John Maxwell say anything.
Oh, my goodness.
And you're immediately drawn in.
Yep.
And very rarely will he go and just answer that question straight away. There's a story to it. He's a great storyteller. And everything you want to take notes on because his tie downs are so solid. And so the best leaders are the best storytellers. They're the ones that understand how to put that sequence into play. And so, but yeah, the storytelling is such a great skill.
Yeah. So a little bit of the backstory for Amplify for me, guys. First, we went to, Rene set up an amazing dinner, and dinner doesn't even do it justice. It's an experience, and it's kind of funny because I'm sitting around these all-stars, and I'm curious what your perspective is because I'm sitting to the left of you, and there's kind of a long table, and I'm looking at, the Josh Meadows of the world and Jeremy Forcier and Denise Donahue, Dan Keller, Dave Savage. Like, these are just amazing people. And I'm like, man, I'm just happy to be there. And I didn't know, like, when you sit down, I'm just thinking this is a normal mortgage dinner. We're going to have fun, and have some drinks. And, like, second one, Rene's already teaching. And even at that dinner, I'm like, what's happening? I got emotional because one of the individuals talked about seeing our show 10 years ago. And again, I didn't even know they had watched. And again, like, you're so smart. You picked up on that and kind of called it out. That was just the first day. And then the second day, you guys didn't get to see any part of the second day, which is really kind of the first full day Rene starts kind of picking people apart. I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but that's the way.
That's pretty close.
Yeah. And we all kind of go through a similar experience, and it's so funny. And I don't know what your perspective is on this, but I watched as you kind of put us through the same process, and I can't remember what the question was, but all of us are successful, and we started with the end of the story. Like, tell me about yourself, Ryan. Well, we closed 500 million last year, blah, blah, blah. And it was like the end of the story, and you're like, dude, stop. Like, okay. And then you started asking questions, and I mean, you were able to take me back to how I got into the business, which is, some of the story there. Was it just our group, or does everybody kind of fall to that tendency of really just telling the end of the story?
Yeah, it's most people will start with what the question asked from a literal perspective. And so we begin with, and most people that have been through any sort of success almost forget about the journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it was just, all they saw was the end. They were so visionary. They just were so clear on what it was. And so that's what comes out, and that's what comes out in storytelling. Or not even in storytelling, that's what comes out when they start in the networking environment or business environment, and they forget that there's a whole story to it. But think of any movie you watch. Imagine if the movie started with the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Game of Thrones started with, them flying away on a dragon or whatever it was. It's like, why would you watch it anymore?
Right.
It was the journey to that scene that got you there. The best movies, they don't begin with that, right? And so it begins with the character building. Who are they? The struggle, and just the realness of life. And we relate to the struggle. We don't relate to just the instant success, because now, the humility though behind it, with the amazing things that you've been able to do, there's still a massive amount of humility when you see somebody 10 years ago. You're the reason they started doing video, because dude, you're OG, man. Like, you've been doing this. One of the first people I remember going and seeing this, like, who's this, who's Ryan and Stacy? Like, I thought your middle initial was N, and it was, the last name was Stacy Hills for years. And so I'm like, but he made this really cool video, and you put me in it, and it was like so cool. I felt like honored, and it made me feel a part of the industry, and but nobody gets around to tell you that.
Yeah.
And you go this whole time thinking, I don't know if I'm making an impact, but you're doing what you love because you're doing it for yourself and for your heart and for the clients and the people you're serving. And then 10 years later, somebody tells you, dude, you're the reason. It's like overwhelming.
Yeah, it was huge. The story that Renee's talking about is at dinner, and then, I got emotional, and I'm not an emotional guy, and that meant the world to me, because when you put yourself out there, and guys, I guess this is encouragement, if you're gonna, pick up what I'm learning and pick up what Renee's teaching of, letting your heart speak from sequence and tell the story and tell your story. Like, it's hard to put yourself out there first for the world, and it's not immediate feedback. Like Renee and we can see each other talk and how we react. You don't get that on social. You put out there, and hopefully somebody likes, hopefully somebody comments, but not always. And that doesn't mean that they're not watching. Like I said, just this week, we had thousands, tens of thousands of people connect that I didn't even know were watching, but they were this entire time. I just didn't hit the right string for them to respond. And that's just encouragement for me. Like, it's okay. And you never know. Just like Renee said, it could be a year, it could be 10 years down the road. It connected with somebody.
And I think that's a good message there too, is that so many people want instant success. Like, I put out a video, no one's watching it. I'm like, I've been doing this 18 years in just the mortgage industry, 20 some years, and I still put out my best videos I put out. I don't know if people are watching them. I don't know, like these last ones I put out, I don't know if they're watching. I mean, I see, some likes and comments, but every one is like, feels like brand new, and somebody's like, man, you're getting stuff. I'm like, you watched it? It's like, I still feel like a kid hoping, did you watch it? Hey, what'd you think? And you never really get to that place of feeling like, oh, I put this out there and everybody sees it. But you gotta, to your point, 10 years before you got any level of, hey, thank you.
Yeah. And it, probably 10 years of, pent up emotion of like, oh my God, somebody at a high level appreciated it and referenced it. Like, I didn't even know. That's the second story of somebody acknowledging it at that dinner. I didn't know that we put you on that video, and it was influencers, and it was just kind of like showing the influencers in the industry at that time. And I never, didn't hear anything back. So I'm like, oh, Renee didn't see it. I had no idea.
Well, I watched it.
I think I even said, like, bro, just like, pick up the phone and shoot a like or something. Like, let me know you saw it. Like, a little bit of heads up, a little bit of encouragement would have been awesome.
But isn't it funny? I didn't think you would need that or cared.
Yeah. Well, there you go, right?
Like, I think that's a good lesson, Tiedown, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we never know. I think maybe the lesson is we just need to assume that everybody needs it. We all need that circular come back and close that loop to say if something's nice, express it. One of my most influential psychology teachers in college says, assume nothing, communicate everything.
Oh, I love that.
That might be a good lesson for us.
Yeah, I love that. The tie down that you're talking about is just, it's funny because I had created video for so long. I came into Amplifii thinking I knew what it was. And I'm like, man, I'm going to lick it. I'm just going to come in there and be Hills, the video guy. And, I kind of felt like I knew what it was and how I was going to perform. And man, I didn't at all. Like it was raw. It was messy. You pulled out a lot of stuff. And you were teaching me frame message tie down, and my brain was scrambled right away. And I felt like I kind of knew how to deliver a message because I had done it for 10 years. And like the Jedi master that you are, like rewired me into like, hey dude, you kind of think but let me just show you a few things. And so whatever tie down and message I felt like I was coming in there, like it got completely lost. And man, you're showing me your work for 20 years. I mean, you've got a gigantic library of work, and I was curious. I never got to ask you in the moment, like, how did you funnel all that work into what you're doing now? Like, why? How come you're so passionate about this now? Because you've done a lot for a lot, and now you seem like you got a real great narrow focus on where you want to go with it all.
Well, to cover what you said before, you do know what you're doing on video. You're one of the best I've seen. What we were doing was working on your next level of it and that next enhancement and getting what I think everybody wants to see is who you are, because you were amazing and you still are. You're incredible at it. But inviting us into a new way of storytelling is not easy, but that's why you're such a pro, man. We can talk about the fight we got into.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, let's talk about that too.
But no, in terms of the focus, what's interesting is that I honestly feel all of it was meant for getting to this point, and working with hostile union environments and manufacturing sites to working with countless different industries on managing change and resistance and innovation, and looking at from a behavioral perspective, what is it that truly causes change, and having a passion for sales. And working with leaders, just getting asked over and over, and for me, being forced to be on stage. It wasn't something that I had chosen. It was something that I needed to do out of just pure survival. And then now looking at this and saying, what the heck is leadership? And leadership is the ability to influence. And John Maxwell says it so eloquently that there is no leadership without influence. And that's one of the truest things I think could be said, because I got frustrated with how leadership was simplified to a cliche quote or an inspirational story. And that's not what leadership is. Leadership is the ability to influence and move people to act in a certain way, or to tap into what their values are. And then I always said, okay, what's the how of that? And so that's where the science came into understanding my own journey. So Amplifii is literally just an expression of my own journey, of understanding my own body language, my own facial expressions, understanding how it is that I can be more influential in this, how can I capture more attention. And really in today's world, when we're in this little box, it's a battle for two things. It's a battle for trust, right? And if I don't have good lighting, I mean, you're the master of it. Look how beautiful your set is. That lighting and that trust is happening through the eyes. And if I'm over here talking, it's just not happening, and even my hands. But then it's also a battle for attention, and how do we capture someone's attention? And that's another piece where we can get really, really caught up in and lost in a boring screen talking head.
Yeah, man, that's so good. And I mean, there are so many value drops and nuggets in just what you just said for people that want to leverage what you're talking about, how we're talking about it, and then leveraging video. Go back and watch that last minute, because there's a lot of value and content in there. So talk about from your point of your reference, like your view, the moment that you kind of see me putting my dukes up. I think day 2, kind of starting to fight you back, because that was kind of interesting, and it could have gone one of two ways, and it went the right way.
I think it comes down to how a lot of people look at resistance. I look at resistance very differently. I see resistance as engagement. And when somebody resists, usually it causes that same response in somebody else of equal battle. To me, I go, okay, we're getting started, right? Because I'm looking for that breakthrough, that thing, tapping into something that was real. And it was, I remember we had asked you to go a little bit deeper and to talk a little story, and I just saw your body and your face, because you got a crazy good poker face. You got that 1,000-yard stare. That comes from your fighting background, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Of getting in that place of being ready to go to war. And you had that look, and I'm like, I know that look.
Yeah, you did.
And it was, and I know that it's like finding a vault to me. And there's something, if there's a big vault, there's a big prize. There's a big treasure on the other side. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a big vault door. There wouldn't be that defensiveness. There's something being defended. And so I look at that saying, okay, that's why he came here, was to get to the other side of that. And that's my job. And my job is, I would have failed you had I not given up. But I'm very comfortable in that scenario. In fact, I think it's a very beautiful conversation that can happen where two people can be very honest. And I also love the fact that you fought with it. And you when I say fight, not physical fight, it's that you were fighting the idea. Because fighting an idea is where things get better. It's where we stand the test of tough questions. If an idea can't stand a couple tough questions, how good of an idea was it? How good of a process is it? But when somebody battles an idea, I get excited because I go, is this truly a good thing? Are we on the right track? Is this something that has strong, solid foundation? And that's where your courage came into play. I said, you're fighting me. And you just looked at me and you go, yep.
That's right.
And I said, that's okay. Allow yourself to fight. And this is good. And I just told everybody, I said, this is the work here. This is the work that we've got to do, because we've got to understand, where is this coming from? But on the other side of this is a beautiful story somewhere. And my guess is that you have learned to push that story away just out of pure survival. And those that can't push those stories away get caught up in it and never get out of it. And so it's the weird paradox of saying the thing that saved you is the thing that ends up hurting you later on. And so there's a timing of when to use it, and then the timing we have to unlearn it. I think that's part of sort of the journey of our life, is where we learn to have short memory spans of the negative things, so we move on to build the future. But then going back to revisit some of those things, we block them out, but those things are how we actually connect to people in the future, where I've been in this scenario before. I have been through these struggles. But if I just say, no, but everything works out great, I've been really lucky and fortunate, and we go, wait, really? Have you?
Yeah.
Well, what about the time that this happened and that happened and that happened? You're like, and sort of the short circuit starts to happen. And the thing is, we don't bring that stuff up to show weakness. We bring that stuff up to show there is a journey to all of it. There is a process that we have to follow. There is the stumble, there is the fall, there is the breakthrough, there is the choice to get back up, there's the courage and the fear of it. And all of that is where your audience goes, that's how I feel right now. I feel like it's impossible, or I feel like it's insurmountable, or I feel like it's unattainable. But if Ryan can do it, and he was there, and that's so real, versus the guy that's got it all figured out, it's easy for us to go, well, they've got it figured out, they're not dealing with what I'm dealing with.
Oh, yeah. Man, this feels so good. I just want to put Rene on my podcast and let you talk for 24 hours. But the two lessons out of that story that I remember learning and thinking back, I'm like, man, those are two very, very high-level lessons that I just was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about. If you've ever been a CEO with your C-suite, what Rene allowed to happen was so smart and next-level leadership. I wanted to fight. And most CEOs and just people in general, C-suites, they don't like those fierce conversations. They actually shy away from them. You allowed that to happen. And you're right. I was able to find a whole nother level, different version of me past that fight. Had you not allowed that, none of that would have happened. And so it took both of us. The first lesson was, wow, what next level leadership for you to allow this fight to happen with this high level group of people. Huge takeaway. And then for me, guys, being vulnerable again, like I had to open up, because what I learned, and you did another exercise that day that you guys discovered and I discovered, that I assume, because I work 3 or 4, 6, 7 steps ahead, I assume I know what the other person is thinking or going to say, and you taught me that in a harsh way. It hurt a little bit, but I'm glad I learned it. But I was assuming a lot, and that's kind of the lesson I was telling yesterday. Like, I got to slow down. I'm working 7 steps ahead, and if I'm working 7 steps ahead and I assume step number 2 is right and it's wrong, everything that follows is wrong as well. And so I'm a D, high D, obviously. I think people can see that.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. You have to allow yourself to go, wait a minute, I can learn something new. Yes, I am successful, or, most C-suite and executives are successful, but look, man, you haven't learned it all. And so I had to be open for Rene, another high-level, teacher, to teach me something new. And I'm so glad that I did. I dropped my guard because I was up, man. I was ready to go. And you allowed the fight. I eventually dropped my guard, learned something new, and working on becoming a better version of myself today, still trying to learn that lesson. Slow down, listen, don't assume. Yes, my mind works fast, but I can't assume what that other person is thinking, saying, or feeling. And that was such a high-level lesson for everybody.
There's a third component to this whole thing that had we not had this third component, it wouldn't have worked. And that was the audience.
Yeah.
You had a group of 9 people that were just as committed that had it been just you and I, it would have been a different argument.
Yeah.
But you had confirmation from 9 other people in tears with you, nodding their heads, and a Jeremy Forcier writing you a note, everybody confirming what you had gone through. And that's the beauty. People tell me, can I do this one-on-one? And my answer is always no.
Yeah.
You want me to teach you how to do public speaking in a private session?
Right.
Public, private? No, you have to do it in front of a group because you need the stress level, number one. But then you also need the feedback from other people than just me. It's one thing I can say something, and then you see 3, 4, 5, 6 other people going, and you're going, oh my God, I guess it's kind of undeniable. And so the dynamic, that's why it's that beautiful dynamic of having 10 people going through this together that creates sort of that journey understanding. But if we were to remove some of those other people, it would have been a very different outcome. There's a science to all of it.
Yeah. So, curious, you listen to Rene and you're just like, oh my goodness, like I gotta sit with Rene. I gotta go to an Amplifii. You see, all the originators, all the influences. I'm just curious, like, what your thought is on a lot of. Thankfully, we're leveraging video more. I love to see that. We've been talking about that for 10 years. But any mistakes, any tips or tricks that you see for people that are leveraging video? Right away, the obvious one is the storytelling. Like, man, let's become masters of storytelling, and I'm working on that as well. But any things that you would say, like, hey guys, let's get a little bit better here or there.
Well, let's talk about some of the obvious basic ones. And I think you're the first to do it, and is having the right equipment. You've got to look at the quality of what we're both doing. There's 2 high definition cameras going on here that put a great signal across, so you can see our facial expressions. There's great audio that sounds good, right? And there's professional lighting involved. But the other hidden secret that both you and I have is we're not alone.
Yeah.
There's
Amazing
a team behind
teams
us here. Yeah, there's a team, and you trying to go at this world alone is hard. Just like anything in life, if I suck at marketing and I try to take on marketing while I'm in sales, why? Get a professional to do it. And so right now, in the corner of my eye, I've got my secret weapon, my partner in crime, Ryan Grams. And he's there. He's got his 3rd camera, and he's doing B-roll right now. So I'm trying to pretend that I don't see him, right? But all that's happening. But I got up this morning, and he's got lighting set up. And what's incredible, I took a picture of it, is not a single one of the lights is pointing at me. Not a single one. He's using reflection off of white walls and things into the air. And I'm going, amazing how, when I bought my ring lights, they were all pointed right at my face. And it would create a flat image in whitewash or just too bright. And there's a science to lighting to that. And that's not my science. That's his science. It's a professional thing. And, one thing you and I were talking about before is when you show up to do an event somewhere, you show up with your PowerPoint or whatever you're going to do. You stand on a stage, and there's cameras pointing at you, and there's a microphone there. All of that was done by a production team. Professionals. You don't have that anymore. All of that professionalism falls on this side of the camera. And so you've got to either learn and be professional of lighting. You've got to learn the Trinity, the exposure triangle.
See, we're still learning.
That's the thing. It's still learning. But there's 3 things on a camera that have to work, and it's this crazy algorithm, and understand all of those things. But do you have to be a pro? No. But do you have to? Can you make a little incremental improvement to make a massive impact? Yes, absolutely. And so, starting with the right equipment, find somebody that knows how to do that. Invest a few $100s in making that happen. That would be the first thing. And then, when the other piece too that Ryan Grams told me, he said, you got to stop thinking about your desk as your desk anymore. If you're truly embracing this virtual world, it's not your desk anymore. This is your set. This is your stage.
So good.
You have that already. I saw the behind the scenes. That's a stage you have there.
So
and with
good.
the click of a button, you can drop down another screen behind you to do that. You've got a beautiful logo that's sitting there. I'm sitting in my living room right now because it was just, we had great lighting. It was more comfortable. But you have to think about your desk as your stage. And so if you have a desk that's messy, you got to fix that. Would you ever shoot a feature film or a commercial with a messy desk? No, it's part of your brand. And so every book you have showing is part of your brand. Everything you've got going on is part of your brand. Make sure that you're wearing what you want to be portrayed as, and all of those little elements matter. But then none of it matters unless if you don't know how to communicate your value proposition and tell your story.
So good, man.
But I'd say the last piece too is that even if you are mediocre at telling your story, if you present yourself in a professional manner, those have an immediate impact on first impression. And that first impression, people are making a decision if they like you or don't like you, if they trust you or don't trust you. Just by having the right equipment, the right lighting, and being able to have just a nice smile, that solves everything in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about maybe you're not great at storytelling yet. Like the video that we saw last week and at your event Amplifii, that was still a rough version of me telling a story from accessing memories that I haven't, and it was really rough. Now that I've learned this and I've been able to think about these stories in sequence, I'm sure I could tell it even better and better and better. So. I love what you said about all of that. I mean, I've been preaching and encouraging, invest into this with good cameras and mics, with teams, man, guys, realtors and lenders specifically. If you're watching a different industry, think about how and what you spend your money on. For our industry, we like to buy leads and things like that. Like nobody will bat an eye about spending $5,000 on some random leads. Imagine if you invested that into your equipment and actually hiring an amazing teammate like Ryan Grams or Ryan Christian or Mickey, who's behind this camera. Like you're truly investing in compounding everything that you're going to be putting out content-wise moving forward. If you hear anything from Rene and I, it's just invest into yourself, into your business with exactly what we're just talking about, equipment and teams.
And I think too, the other thing too is, if you're listening to this, most of the people that have the skill to do this don't even realize that they are needed right now. Most of the people that have this skill are frustrated and scared because they lost all of their video clients. Everybody stopped investing in creating marketing videos. They stopped investing in all sorts of things. And so you got to go to them and say, hey, because I remember I called Ryan. I said, this is the best thing that ever happened to you. He said, really, losing all my clients and nobody wanted to pay? I said, yeah. I said, because you're the best filmmaker I know. And you're also one of the smartest technologists I know. And the combination of film and technology to be able to deliver a great story via technology that just happens to also have cameras and lighting. That's the innovation. And so you, if you're listening to this, you may have to go to somebody, maybe a college student or somebody that realizes, oh my God, nobody's doing film right now, saying, hey, look, I need you to solve this. And let their creativity go. Let their innovation go. Challenge them on doing some of these things. And that's where the innovation begins to happen.
There's another big lesson, and I wasn't sure I was going to talk about this, but it has come up so much this week for me. And again, every week we're trying to talk about relevant content. And I hope you're okay talking about this, but post-COVID, you're another person that is forced to evolve, and you are. Like what you've shown me, and I don't know if you can talk about it, but if you can,
Sure,
I just want to talk about the fact that you're another person, and I know there's a ton of people watching that have been forced to evolve during this. And you don't really have a choice. It's not one or two, it's either evolve or die. So you are doing that, and can you talk about, a little bit of how you've kind of answered that call of evolution, because you're too humble. I know you just want to provide value, but what you do and your teaching is value and amazing content and is relevant. So I know you don't want to talk about and necessarily put the spotlight on you, but guys, if you're not following Rene, follow Rene. If you can get into an Amplifii, get into an Amplifii for all the reasons I've shared today. But talk about your evolution journey and kind of where it's taken you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And, spending your whole career for me, my world is defined by calendar. And if I could look at a calendar and I see dates of up-and-coming events, I know that drives a speaking fee. And so our success is measured by watching a calendar fill. And spending 20 years to get to a place where you see a calendar filling and you see it coming, and it's like we're going to have the best year ever. And then I see the NBA cancels due to this coronavirus, and then literally calls every hour, emails every hour, and having to walk over to that calendar and erase 15,000, 20,000, 8,000, and just erase over and over, and losing 100% of the business. And I sat on my desk, at my desk, and I started giggling, to be honest. And I'm like, okay. So I first called my assistant and her husband, who was helping me with the Amplifii videos, Tristan, and I said, guys, things are about to change. And I said, and we have two choices. I said, and I'm only going to give us one, though.
Right.
And I said, this has got to change. We've got to think differently. And we need to immediately start putting content out. And people are like, what are you going to charge for it? And I said, I can't. I said, why? I said, well, I feel like everything that I've studied and learned is exactly what's needed right now. And there's no money right now. People aren't spending money. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, think about it this way. If you're sitting inside your home and nice and cozy, and you're watching people drown outside and you've got a boat, is that the time to think about monetization? Or is it the time to get in your frickin' boat and go help people?
Mm-hmm.
It was simple from that perspective. And I wanted to understand, because I knew that immediately, once the NBA canceled and sports started canceling, that irrationality would follow. And people would be getting scared.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, well, there's system one, the reptilian, and the evolution of the brain and how it works. We're going to go to a very primitive form of thinking. So, and people are going to be scared. So let's put something out there to understand where people are on the courage scale. And that was our first video. And we wanted to give people an understanding what happens when we fall below the line and everything, but really a call to leadership, because leaders needed to step up. And I wanted to speak louder than the other irrational voices. And it was great because Steve Harney, one of my dear friends and somebody that I look up to, was doing the same thing. And we'd be, on the sidelines, talking, and he made a commitment to not sleep for 60 days just to be louder and put out content. And, watching that, I was like, man, that was awesome. And so we put that first one out. Then we put on neuroscience of corona behavior, because I want to give people a structure to understand structure, order, predictability, what's happening in the brain during this. And then the third one was a call to action, which was, let's now go keep selling, because you have to understand that the businesses need to keep going, right? And so let's understand ourselves emotionally. Let's understand the science behind what's going on, and let's put a real simple 6-step process to keep selling. And so then there were a few other videos that followed that. But for me, it was about putting into practice what it was that I've always said, which is, one, that leadership needs to happen during times of crisis, and that's the time that leaders are coming to life. And so we had to remind people and put the content out to help them. And also had to do it myself. But then the other piece too was, I've always said that innovation does not come from abundance, it comes from constraint. It comes from the times where we lose things.
Yep. And
that's when I called Ryan. I said, this is going to be our most innovative time ever. And you'd be shocked to know how many people that I talk to that say that, but during this time just cowered and started talking about how bad their life was and just how much they had lost. And this is just changing times. I mean, these are just really, and I'm like, you know what? I don't have time. I hang up the phone, and I got on the phone with Ryan, and I'm like, he goes, okay, what are we doing? And I was like, that's the energy we need.
Yep.
And immediately comes over, started creating, started thinking, and we have done some of the most creative, innovative stuff that I've ever done, and it would have never happened. Never would have happened. We wouldn't be talking like this with looking into a teleprompter as my screen right now.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have to look away. I mean, all of these things are happening because of what happened. And so there's always a blessing if we choose to create it, if we choose to see it. Now, that is not downplaying the tragedy
Right.
of everything that's happened. Not at all.
And I'm so glad you shared that, because there's so many people that, just felt like you felt like, man, so much momentum, and the rug just got pulled out from underneath them. And I mean, I feel horrible for everybody. I mean, we're all kind of in that situation. But, you, like you said, I always say necessity is the mother of invention, and that's what you're saying. Like, we had to. Like, we didn't have a choice. We had to evolve. And, yet again, here's Rene, version whatever, 42, 45, and same with me. So I wanted you to share that story, because I'm so proud as a friend, like, seeing you go, okay, man, we had this thing figured out, and now we're going to try it a different way. And the stuff that you're coming out with, I'm so excited for people to see in the future is next level stuff.
I got to tell you something that you don't know, I think. I just realized that you don't know this. So there are a couple people that I remember that called me during this, because, I have them I have a very short memory around negative things, right? So when I lost everything, I didn't spend another ounce thinking about it. I just was like, okay, we're just going to recreate, because I'm like, I've been in this position so many freaking times. I've lost everything. Here we go again. I forget who I was talking to. I think it was Brendan Donaldson. As a spider spends all this time weaving this beautiful web, just a beautiful web. And it's just a work of art, and it takes, I don't know how long it takes for a spider to weave. And then somebody comes by and they knock it down. The moment it knocks it down, that spider is already spinning the web, going back down, and starting to recreate.
So cool.
There wasn't a moment of going, oh, boo-hoo, right? But I'm still human. And I remember getting a phone call from you, and you just said, hey, I know, and I'm guessing this hit you pretty hard. Are you okay? And I'll never forget that, dude, because I got so emotional, because it was one of the first moments I allowed myself to feel that, yeah, we lost a lot. And but you had the awareness and the caring enough to make that phone call. So I want to thank you for that. And based on what we said before, I didn't tell you that before, but you were one of those people that called and said that, and that meant a lot to me. Yeah,
man. I'm your biggest fan. Going through what I went through, and you teaching me new things. Your work's too important, and if Rene's calendar is empty, if you're a CEO, start calling now and fill it up. I don't know when COVID opens up, but book Rene, and I know he's too humble to say that. Book Rene right away, and if you can get into an Amplifii in the future or now, whenever that opens up, I'm telling you, great things are on the other side. If you can get your C-suite with Rene, holy smokes. Like that is a game changer. So, Rene, let's wrap it up, because there's so much value. I'd love to have you on again, because we could talk for hours.
Anytime, brother.
And we probably scratched the surface on what I learned just over those 3 days. But, I just want to. I'll kind of wrap it up, and I'll kind of give you the last word. But, guys, if you've heard anything today, it's two guys that have hustled, grind, had success, been knocked down, had to reinvent. I hope that connects with you. I hope that some of the vulnerability that I shared last week, if you're a guy like me that doesn't tend to reflect, doesn't tend to show that side, I hope that encourages you to kind of dive into that a little bit and open up a little bit, because I was amazed at what Rene taught me and how many people connected with that. And I'm so thankful that I really got to spend that time with Rene. And so I encourage you to just open up, and we've never arrived. I don't care how old, how much success, like none of us have arrived. And I said yesterday, man, I hope I never become complacent, and I always continue to learn something new.
I hear that, man. Yeah, there's no arriving, because then a virus can take it all away from you.
Some random thing that's the worst part. Like, I'm okay if I did something wrong and like my business goes like that. I can look in the mirror and be like, oh, you dummy. But nobody did anything wrong. They were doing everything right. That's the worst part, and it still, hit everybody. So.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, dude. Your courage is, and I say this all the time, my ideas are nothing without people like you that take them and implement them and give me a platform to talk about them, because the power that you have to reach out and to make a platform, give me a place to do that, give me an opportunity to do that, is what makes my work possible. So I am nothing without what you're doing. So I want to thank you and honor you for that, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, man, if anybody has questions, tag Rene down below. We will put his website so you can connect with Rene. for all the CEOs that are going to book him after this conversation. So thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.